A very good evening to all the dear students. Today, we have among us Dr. Renuka Roy, working as an associate professor at Porwal College, Kamptee, Nagpur, to engage an online session on Naipaul's House for Mr. Biswas. I welcome you, ma'am, on behalf of the host institutions and request you to conduct the session. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Madhavi Mohoril, madam. At the outset, I thank the coordinating colleges for taking this initiative since these activities, they are highly beneficial for the students and they are benefited in terms of getting ready material at hand. The slides, the material that we give are always helpful to them. So without taking much of in your time, let us start with today's novel, A House for Mr. Biswas by V.S. Naipaul. As we all know, Naipaul is a Nobel laureate writer of Indian origin. He was born in Trinidad. Now, where is it Trinidad? Trinidad is one of the Caribbean islands. These Caribbean islands, they are very famous. They are situated between North America and South America. There are a number of islands there: Cuba, Jamaica, Trinidad, Tobago, and these islands are famous for their demographic uniqueness. They are very different. They are tropically situated, lush green island with flora and fauna, with lots of coastal area that keeps on attracting the tourist. And in addition to this, we have multicultural milieu in this island. How come this has come multicultural background? Because this island had been invaded and colonized by several colonizers: Spanish explorers, French colonizers, British colonizers. They have come here over the period of many centuries. They have conquered this land. They have used this land for plantation as well as the sugar estate. So during the colonial period, this was a kind of hub of all slave related activities. So before moving on with Naipaul, let me draw your attention to the transatlantic exodus. What is this Middle Passage? Middle Passage is the slave trade, wherein the colonizers, the French, British, Dutch, and Spanish people used to bring or enslave the slaves from the people from the African continent, and they were brought in very brutal, very bad condition. They were brought to these islands. Some of were taken to the European continent in order to work as slaves, and some were brought to these islands to work in their sugar estates. So they were denied basic human rights. This went on for number of years till abolition of slavery came into practice. It is around in 1878 that slavery was completely stopped, abolished, and it gave rise to new kind of workers, employment of the workers, and they were called as indentured laborers. Now, from where these indentured laborers they come? These indentured laborers were brought on contractual basis from the Indian subcontinent. Yes, they were from India. They were brought from Gangetic belt of India, like Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, West Bengal. The workers, the poor farmers, those who were not having very good earning resources in India, they were lured by the Britishers of very good wages and a completely multi-ethnic milieu where they need not follow the stringent caste related behavior that was imposed in India. Those stratifications, they can negotiate all those things in the new land. So number of workers, even thousands and thousands of Indian workers, they came by ship to this to these islands of Trinidad, Tobago, Cuba, Jamaica, and they settled here. Surprisingly enough, they were brought for a contractual, for a limited period of time. But after their limited contract period was over, many of them, they denied going back to their own land and they preferred settling down in this new land. So here starts history of Indo-Caribbean people. They started living in this new area, contesting all the social, economical, cultural odds. So let us move on to the next slide. Yes. Basically, Caribbean has got their own literary tradition that comes under the category of West Indies literature. But to for a long period of time, there were no strong voice of representing Indo-Caribbean populace in the literature of West Indies. It was with V.S. Naipaul, Sir Prasad Naipaul, Siva Naipaul, David Debirin, Sam Selvon, Ramabai Spinett, Rajkumari Singh, and Mahadai Das. All these talented people, they brought to the fore the multicultural, multi-ethnic, and extremely different Indo-Caribbean history and their social, political, economical life on the literary page. So among them, we will discuss today Naipaul's dad, V.S. Naipaul. He stands out to be the extremely prominent writer because he is the Nobel laureate. And we are very proud to announce here that he was man of Indian origin. Naipaul, in his writing, he dealt with the themes like alienation and exile. So Naipaul always felt himself, his own relationship with Trinidad extremely difficult. He has mostly disowned his legacy with the island, and he has announced himself as a man of Eurocentric inclination, and he had always announced that he is a Londoner by his upbringing, by his education, by his nurturing and training. With the ancestral land of India, for a short period of time, he felt great affinity because India was a land of which he has heard. Indians are the culture that he has seen in the surrounding Trinidadian, society. So their way of worshipping, their way of cooking, their way of behaving, even reciting the religious scriptures and all, were observed and perceived by Sir Naipaul very well right from the childhood. But when during his visit to India, he found that condition of India is extremely chaotic, and he could not adjust himself with the shift in his own earlier idea or perception about India as land of his dreams, land of his reveries, the land where he wanted to go back to, and the India that he could actually witness, which is full of squalor, dirt, overtly populated, and he was highly nauseated and averted with India. And he wrote three memorable trilogies about India: An Area of Darkness, India, A Million Mutinies Now, India, A Wounded Civilization. These were the three trilogies that Sir Naipaul has written, documented his disillusionment with his land of origin. So Naipaul, basically, he has tried his hand in all the yonas, both fiction and non-fiction. His fictional work are many, more than 30, out of which I'll name a few, like The Mystic Measure, in which he has portrayed the character of Ganesh Ramsumer, a failed school teacher turned to a measure, a mystic healer, and finally a political leader. In House for Mr. Biswas, we will learn about the character of Mr. Mohan Biswas, a man who is a failure all his life, but finally he gets the meaning of his life in the multicultural, disorderly milieu of Caribbean island. The Mimic Men, we read about Ralph Singh and his interracial marriage with Sandra. Half a Life, we read about Billy Chandra and how this man, he writes, documents his life's history during exile in some London hotel. Naipaul has been awarded and given a number of awards and laurels for his work. He was knighted. In 1989, he was awarded with Nobel Prize for his literary contribution, which is extremely outstanding because he has brought to the fore the suppressed history of his own people, as well as through other places, through his travelogues and his non-fictional works. He has received David Cohen British Literature Prize by Arts Council of England in 1998, 1903. And throughout his life, he kept on contributing in the literary world. Now, let us see about the about the work under our present study, that is A House for Mr. Biswas. House for Mr. Biswas is generally considered as Naipaul's most significant, literary work. Through this work, Naipaul has tried to bring to fore, or to give a kind of real depiction of Hindu Indo-Trinidadian persons like Mohan Biswas, who continuously strive for success and mostly they fail, and they find themselves ill at ease with the society around them. And Nepal has used wonderful technique of humor and irony in order to depict the odd and oddities of his own society, eccentricities of men and manner. And he has brought forth caricatured. All his characters are the caricatures. They are like cartoon figures. They through their behavior, through their odd activities, they induces humor. At the same time, they reveal the truth behind the disintegrated society in the Caribbean. Now let us move ahead with the next slide. What is the central theme of this book? Primary theme of the novel is the search for a stable sense of personal identity. We read about the character of Mr. Mohan Biswas, who is born in a family of a laborer. His father Raghu is a laborer, and Raghu dies at a very young age, leaving Mr. Biswas, his three siblings, and his mother utterly penniless and at the mercy of Tara, their relative. So Mr. Biswas loses his own house at a very young age, and throughout the novel, we read that he keeps on shifting from one dwelling to another, and he hardly finds any conformity, any root, any any particular place to call his own, claim on a land. So house symbolizes for Mr. Biswas his personal identity. Until he attains his own house, a firm structure within which he can seek his own identity, destiny, he is like a faceless man adrift on the tides of the life. So he is always moving from one place to another, and he finds that his own condition is extremely pathetic, and he could not, neither he himself feels, nor could he extend solace to his family like his mother, his sister, or even his wife. He could never extend the feeling of solace. So this is a wonderful theme that has been woven equally well with the writer's technique of humor and irony. Writer has dramatized many incidences, and which has subtly brought forth the irony and the pathos behind the apparent humorous scenes. So let us move ahead with the chapter schemes. Before we move on with the chapters, let us see the characters. The protagonist of the novel is Mr. Mohan Biswas. Mohan Biswas, according to some of the critics, is based on Sir V.S. Naipaul's father, Sri Prasad Naipaul, who himself, Sir Prasad Naipaul, himself feels like he had lost his identity in the sprawling, household of his in-laws. Shama is Shama's character. Shama is Mohan's wife, is based on Draupadi Naipaul, Naipaul's mother. Raghu, Mohan's father. Hmm? Tara is Mohan's mother's sister, very overbearing and traditional woman who holds control of Mohan's life for some time. Bhandar is Tara's brother-in-law. Pandit Jairam is Mohan's employer. Mrs. Tulsi, Shama's mother. Anand is Mohan's son, and Savi is Mohan's daughter. These are the characters. As I have already told you, Nepal has employed the technique of caricaturing all this character. What is caricature? Caricature means giving a kind of comic perspective. So their dialogues are sometimes extremely exaggerating. Sometimes their gestures are highly dramatic. Sometimes their actions are extremely overbold. So this is how he has not portrayed them as the plain character. Otherwise, the satire could not have happened. So these characters are all eccentric. They are sometimes you will find that they are more loud, like Shama's sister Chinta. She is she is reciting Ramayana loudly. She is beating her kids loudly. She is shouting. She is quarreling, and she is, even during her obedience to her husband, she is continuously talking something. So you'll find that these characters are caricatures. They are the cartoon-like characters. So this is the technique that Mr. Naipaul has used. The novel has this episodic structure. So as you will find that these are the episodes that we have in the novel, and novel progresses, and along with Mr. Biswass's character also progresses. We see him right from childhood, his birth till his death. So it is a budding Roman kind of novel, and uh, novel opens with prologue. In the prologue, you will see that Mr. Biswas is staying in his debt-ridden, utterly shaky, ill-built, ill-constructed house, which is almost in derelict condition, and Shama is attending Mr. Biswas. Mr. Biswas is also very, obedient and very respectful towards Shama, unlike in the rest of the novels, and they are sharing very good bonds, like ordinary husbands and wife. And Mr. Biswas, although he is he is extremely ill, he has lost his job, he has incurred lots of debt, but still he is satisfied. Why? Because at last he feels that he has claimed a land of his own on in this alien milieu. So before we go ahead, let us see what were the happenings in the early lives of Mr. Biswas before Tulsi's. Tulsi's were the family of Mr. Biswas's in-law. So before Mr. Biswas was married, we read about his childhood. He was a son of a farm laborer called Raghu. Before his birth, Raghu and Bipti, they have got fierce quarrel, and Bipti walks all the way to Pagotis, where her mother stays, and there this boy is born at very odd time, 12 o'clock at night, wrongly born with 6 fingers. And the Dai, who was called to give birth, to help in the assist in the child's birth, she announces that boy is extremely unlucky, and he will really bring disgrace to the family. The next day, Pandit was summoned, in order to find out some remedy, Pandit announces that boy is really his sneeze, the boy's sneeze is really not lucky. It might bring bad luck, ominous, and the boy should be kept away from the fire as well as from water, and he should not be shown to his father until 15 days. So in order to, meanwhile, Raghu reconciles with Dipti, and he comes back and he wants to see his son. So they make Raghu see the face of his son uh, on a brass vessel in which oil is filled. So this is how they start. There are many comic instances, like whenever the boy sneezes, the Raghu prefers to stay at home, because even if he goes out to work, he is afraid that he might face some losses. After some days, the boy, following some mischief, he drowns a neighbor's calf. Dhari's calf. Dhari. Name of the neighbor is Dhari. And Raghu, the boy hides himself. Master Mohan Biswas, he hides himself, and Raghu, in order to search for his son, he dives several times in the cattle pond, and finally he drowns himself, and he couldn't survive. So Mr. Biswas and the entire family, they were left to the mercy of Tara. Left on the mercy of Tara. Now, who is Tara? Tara is Bipti's sister, who is extremely affluent, and they have rum shops, and they have several other businesses. So Dehuti is taken up by Tara as their maid servant. Bipti and Mohun, they stay in a mud hut in the backyard of the Tara's household, where Bipti, she cooks food for Tara's servants, and Mohun has to partake the food served by his mother, who is extremely sullen. She is not happy with her present predicament. Tara has some ideas, some dreams for Mohun, because Mohun is very good at reading and reading newspaper and studying. So Tara wants Mr. Biswas to join Pandit Jairam and take the training to become a Pandit by profession. But Mr. Biswas is extremely impatient. One day, after some misdemeanor, Pandit prefers to throw him out, because Mr. Biswas contaminates his oriental tree by throwing his own, defecation, own waste in a napkin, and stool in a napkin, and that really drives Pandit almost crazy, and he is driven away from that household of Pandit Jairam. And Mr. Biswas finally lands in Bhandat's rum shop, where he was accused of stealing, and he was brutally beaten by Rabidat and Bhandat, and they are Tara's brother-in-laws. And finally he decides that he will not be dependent on anyone, and he takes up sign painting. This art of sign painting, writing down the nameplates, it lands him in Tulsi household. So he reaches Hanuman house, where the Tulsis, they live and they have their shops. And he is hired by Seth, Tulsi's brother-in-law, to paint some signboards. Here he happens to see Shama. She is extremely attractive, short, and a girl of 16. And Mr. Biswas feels that his writing a love note will not land up him in any danger. But instead of Shama receiving that note, it is Mrs. Tulsi who catches hold of that note. And after a short and brief meeting with Mrs. Tulsi and Seth, Mr. Biswas finds himself almost agreeing marrying Shama. Mrs. Tulsi cunningly makes Mr. Biswas marry Shama without any dowry, without any fortune promise on his name, because she says that it is a love match. So Tara is extremely heartbroken, because she feels that Mr. Biswas was is actually extremely a promising boy who has been who is now caught in a real gum pot, that is Tulsi household. In Tulsi household, Biswas finds that he is neither respected nor he is given any position. He is driven into a book-shaped small room with other Tulsi people, and here the Shama also, she doesn't feel either love or respect for her husband. So there he finds that his identity is completely dissolved. He loses his own name and identity in a Tulsi household. So he decides that he will rebel. He decides to act like a buffoon and nonconformist. He keeps on calling name to everyone. And one day he crosses all the limits and he throws the food served by Shama out of the window, which falls on the Obad, Tulsi's son's head. Mrs. Tulsi realizes this misdemeanor, this misbehavior of Mr. Biswas, and she decides that this boy should be kept away from the other Tulsi clan, and he was sent to the chase, where he was asked to run a small shop, and there were two mud rooms adjoining the shop. Here Mr. Biswas incurs, here number of people incur lot of debt on Mr. Biswas, and they take the things from him and do not pay him. So debtors, they keep on pestering, and one of the debtors is Mungru, who turns out to be extremely smart for Mr. Biswas. And ultimately, following the suggestion of Mrs. Tulsi and Seth, Mr. Biswas has to insure and burn the shop. From here, Mrs. Tulsi doesn't bring Mr. Biswas back to Hanuman house, whereas he was sent to the middle of sugarcane plantation owned by Seth, and there he was not even given a proper place to live in. He has to live in the barracks among other plantation workers. Here, Mr. Biswas goes through a very severe state of depression because Mrs. Shama is not with him, and he feels that he is completely, alone in the entire world. And one day he visits Tulsi household with a small, doll's house for Savi, his daughter. The entire Tulsi family, they feel antagonized. They feel that Mr. Biswas is showing partiality and partial attention to his own daughter, which is not acceptable in the Tulsi household, and this makes Shama break the dollhouse. Mr. Biswas is utterly disheartened, and he comes out of the Tulsi household, but Anand accompanies. In the green wells, Mr. Biswas asked some of the laborers to build a house for him made of corrugated iron sheet. But during a storm, a fierce storm, the entire house gets demolished. Mr. Biswas goes through a very, very severe depression, and he is extremely ill, and Anand is completely shaken, shocked to see his father in this condition. And following this incident, Mr. Biswas is sent back to Hanuman house, where he regains his health. But he decides that he will not stay in Hanuman house, but he will move out of there, and he reaches Port of Spain Island and stays with his sister, and there he gains a job of journalist in Trinidad Sentinel. Here he is the bringer of sensational news from the entire Port of Spain, and he receives lots of reputation for the same. Mrs. Tulsi returns to Hanuman house. She's very old, and Mr. Biswas, whose mentor at Sentinel, Mr. Brunel, he is fired, and Mr. Biswas once again finds that his position is extremely, shaky. He keeps on visiting Ajoda, he keeps on visiting Tara, but still he cannot find any anchorage. Very soon, the entire family moves to Short Hills, where there is lots of flora and fauna, a very good farm. But Tulsis, they face lots of trouble because there were very less transport services available in the Short Hills. In the Short Hills, once again, Mr. Biswas tries to build his own house, but due to his own mistake, due to his own casual approach, he burns his own house. From there, once again, Mr. Biswas and the entire Tulsi family comes back to the port of Spain. And there, some of the Tulsi widows, like Basdai and the others, they start the boarding. Yes. Yes. Some of the Tulsi, some of the Tulsi widows, they start their boarding houses in that in that place, in that very congested place. Mr. Biswas finds that he doesn't have any privacy. There is an instance when Mr. Biswas's rose garden was very nicely flourishing, but Mrs. Tulsi orders that said truck should be, parked on the flower bed made by Mr. Biswas. So this creates a kind of sense of loss in the Mr. Biswas's mind. In one of the incidents, we find that when Ovid returns back from London, Mr. Biswas is, without any notice, asked by the Mrs. Tulsi to vacate the household, vacate the room that he was occupying. Even Ovid humiliate Anand after his return, and these incidences leaves him extremely depressed and heartbroken. He decides to purchase a land of his own, and he happens to meet a legal clerk, and who and this clerk, solicitor's clerk, shows Mr. Biswas a house, and he purchases the house, which is very overpaid. It is in very derelict condition, not properly ventilated. Still, Mr. Biswas is happy. In the epilogue section, we read that Mr. Biswas joins Sentinel once again, but he is so ill that he faints and collapses at the workplace, and he has to leave his job. He is utterly debt-ridden. Anand doesn't return back after his death, but it is Savi who comes back to her father's rescue, and she decides to pay off all the debt. So this is the story of Mr. Biswas, who never finds satisfaction in the entire life. Some of the symbols and the characters that are used in the novel are extremely significant. The incomplete house is a symbol of incompleteness of the lives and their isolations and fears and futility. Hanuman house is a huge sprawling mansion built by Pandit Tulsi. But for Mohan Biswas, it is a symbol of dependence, servitude, humiliation. Mrs. Tulsi is authoritative and stoic matriarch. She is even the representative of dying Indian culture in Trinidad. So, shift of Tulsi household, we find that some of the odd things we will notice, that Tulsis make their daughters, all 14 daughters, marry proper Hindu Brahmin grooms, but all the Tulsi boys, they marry Christian boys. So it is the shift from purity to hybridity. So they started drifting onto hybrid life and culture. We find that the youngsters in the Tulsi household, like Savi, like Mr. Anand, and Ovid, and many other young children, they feel that they should move out of Trinidad, and they move to London, they move to America, North America. This shows that the generation, they started migrating from this island because this island, they felt, have not do not have any promise for them. Mr. Biswass's quest for a house, it symbolizes his overwhelming desire to claim for himself, organize that space himself, and determine his identity. Because throughout his life, he always felt that his identity has been questioned. As a child, he is driven to Tara's hut, mud hut, where his mother is unhappy serving him the food because the hut doesn't belong to her. Even the food that she was serving was not hers. In Hanuman house, Shama is sullen, and she never shows any obedience or any belongingness for her husband, any respect or love for her husband, because Shama too feels that Hanuman house doesn't belong to her. In the rest of the novel, we find that Mr. Biswas keeps on moving from one place to another, and he tries to build his house and fails number of times. He doesn't find, even for himself, a stable identity. Sometimes he works as the journalist. At sometimes he is working in some government department. Sometimes he is collecting funds for deserving destitutes, and sometimes he is just at the mercy of Tulsi's or Taras for his livelihood. So the entire novel shows that a man's quest for identity, his quest for wholeness. So it is a wonderful book, and which has been written by none other than Mr. Naipaul. And the entire book I'll call as an epic of West India, Indo-Caribbean men and their struggle during that period, when they had to face multiple impressions, different cultural and social competitions, and there they have to retain their ethnicity. At the same time, they wanted to climb up social ladder after long duration of social and historical and political eclipsing. So here we end our presentation. I thank Dr. Madhavi Mohoril Madam and the rest of the team for giving this opportunity. And the time is very short because each and every character, each and every aspect of the Naipaul is so deep, and the novel is so voluminous that it is not possible to encapsulate the entire thing in a single session. But still, I feel that there are plethora of online material available. Please check to their authenticity. Read good papers available on BS Naipaul and A House for Mr. Biswas. You will definitely benefit it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for a very informative and insightful lecture on B.S. Naipaul's House for Mr. Biswas, which actually achieved worldwide acclaim. Thank you so much for this very interesting session. On behalf of the host institution, I express humble sense of thankfulness to you. Thank you so much.